Is anyone there? Can you hear me?
Hi, I'm Ipie, and welcome to the Ipie Show. I'm very happy to see you've joined me here today. It's been getting very lonely here in the void. Now, you may not know this about me. You probably don't know anything now that I think about it. But I'm a big proponent of all things ridiculous and strange. And in recent years, there's been no shortage of video games that fit that criteria. With the indie game scene slowly growing in size and scope since its initial boom in the early 2000s, plenty of smaller developers have been creating games with unique concepts, interesting twists, and weirdness. And this game is no exception. Back in times long past, otherwise known as 2003, a small browser game called Kingdom of Loathing was launched. Noted for its unique sense of humor that absolutely appealed to the rest of the internet at the time, it rose in popularity. It was so popular, in fact, that it's still continuously updated now, decades later. Despite that being a very impressive feat, especially compared to other MMOs, KOL doesn't have a whole lot to talk about. Being confined to a website comes with limitations after all. But in spite of that, in this case, what you see isn't all that you get. And it's free to play, so it would be kind of pointless to talk about it when you could just play it. And I mean honestly, even if it were a game I could buy in Steam or some capitalist malarkey like that, fantasy is kind of overplayed in the RPG world, so it still wouldn't be all that interesting to... Well, crap. 2017 was a phenomenal year for video games. Countless games were released that no doubt will go down in video game history as absolute classics. However, no game could even scratch the gaming masterpiece that was. This game has a cactus man. His name is Bill. It's interesting to see how different West of Loathing is from its predecessor, as the leap from web-based MMO to Unity-based RPG meant that some changes had to be made to the traditional Loathing formula, whatever that means. But how about we get started and ride on into the West of Loathing. God, that was dumb. You start with a very fun character creator based on a shooting gallery, being able to pick from female, male, bear, owl, and cat gender options. I decided to broaden my horizons a bit and chose to be a bear. I gave them a very fitting name as well. I can now start my Wild West adventure, but not before trying my hand at the shooting gallery first. Our story begins the same way all bears' journeys do, dreaming about what character class they may become. Stripped down slightly from Kingdom of Loathing, where there were two classes based on each primary stat, one focused on defense and the other focused on offense. We now only have one per stat. I kinda like this better, to be honest. It streamlines the process to be much more approachable to new players. And we obviously can't have fantasy tropes like knights, wizards, and archers in a western setting. That would be ridiculous. So instead we have the cowboy staples. For the muscle class we have the cow puncher. The West has been needing plenty of these fillers since the cows came home. Someone has to knock some sense into after all. For mysticality we have the bean slinger. It's commonly known that cooking is a form of wizardry, but it's a very dangerous profession in the West. The cows are out for revenge. And finally, the moxie class is the snake oiler. People need potent potions to deal with the cows, and the snake oiler is the right traveler to sell them to you, or scam you out of your money. The snake oiler is actually a strange inclusion for me. Any fellow Loathing fan might recognize a pattern with these class options. Mysticality still revolves around food and muscle still revolves around beating up animals. This isn't the case for Moxie though. In KOL, the two Moxie classes were music-based, a theme that's absent in West of Loathing. It's too bad, honestly. I would have loved to play a harmonica or banjo-wielding maniac, but at least we still have the vague theme of being a felon. In the end, I decided to be a cow puncher, as cows are the arch-enemies of bears in nature. Bearman wakes up, picks up a book that's a great joke but will not be relevant to my playthrough, and lets their wonderful pet crow rustle free. It's only fair for him to be as free as us, or both animals after all. We get a good taste of the game's writing through this interaction, but I'll return to that point later. Bearman's mother helps him choose a skill, another very fun inclusion due to being a more traditional RPG. I let Bearman specialize in bartering, as if you rearrange a few letters you get beardering, which has the word bear in it. Bearman's dad gives them their grandma's brass knuckles, sounds like a badass grandma, and their brother asks them their motivation for leaving. Bearman says that they want to get off the damn farm as it isn't winter anymore and bears tend to get restless after hibernating. Bearman then heads off to the west, beginning their very first adventure. Ignore that. The game officially takes off with a tutorial, which I can appreciate for only being as long as the player wants it to be. I decided to play through most of it again, as it has some easily missable content that I hadn't seen before, and also to show off the game's wonderful writing. The World of Loathing is definitely a humorous one, with charming interactions, strange but endearing items, and barrels full of puns. However, the game isn't afraid to be a bit more serious either. I'm not sure if Kingdom has anything similar, but there are quite a few moments in West that lean much more in line with serious storytelling. Susie Cottrain, one of your potential partners, is a very good example of this, as it relates to one of my favorite story elements in West of Loathing, the cows. See, West is actually a post-apocalypse in a western trenchcoat. The game takes place after an apocalyptic event, when the cows came home, and things haven't been the same since. The cows are this game's analog for demons, recurring enemies with an item weakness and importance to the plot. They even have cultists sacrificing in their name. This is the kind of story edition that's very fitting for the ludicrous world of Loathing, but in universe the event is devastating, and the Quatrains are a good example of that dichotomy. When you meet Susie at first, she's just a random woman brooding silently in a saloon. If you question the bartender about her, she'll say that she lost her family to a cow attack. Part of the tutorial will take you to a graveyard, and you can actually find the graves of her family. Timothy Quatrain, devoted husband, Elizabeth Quatrain, beloved daughter, and Silas Quatrain, a baby. And while I don't think graves of infants are usually that blunt, this is certainly a depressing sight. Talking to Susie will have her recount her story, and if you retrieve her rifle from her desecrated ranch, she'll join your party with a vengeance against the cows. She'll have a notch in her gun for each cow you kill, which I think is a pretty neat detail. Segments like these amidst the wacky shenanigans of Loathing make me appreciate the game a lot more, even if just from a writing perspective. Because even if you engage in buffoonery like exposing a fake cardboard cutout town or getting high on mushrooms, the game somehow manages to still feel real, or at least lived in, if that makes sense. Which is incredibly high praise for a game that consists entirely of stick figures. And while that sticky art style might have stayed the same when compared to its predecessor, the gameplay certainly hasn't. Now that the world of Loathing is rendered in an actual game engine and not Google Chrome, there are a lot more options for gameplay variety. While there may only be 3 classes, there's still plenty of ways to build your character. The first and most obvious way is the present your mom gives you when you leave the farm, as I mentioned earlier. Another more subtle way the game lets you build your character is through perks. Perks can range from stat bonuses to extra dialogue options, and the way you get them depends on how you play. For example, choosing to talk this guy out of his life of crime will grant you the honorable perk, giving you non-violent solutions to certain encounters. On the other hand, you can get the mostly scabs perk, gross, from running into too many cacti in the overworld. It's a really funny way to get an honestly pretty handy buff. And you know what they always say, if there's health points, there's combat. No one says that. It's not even true. I quite like the combat in West of Loathing. It's a massive step up from just clicking on a drop-down menu in Kingdom. There aren't any traditional random encounters, thank God. The only time a random encounter will trigger is when traveling between locations, or if the player chooses to wander on the map screen. Even then, the encounters might not even be combat related. A lot of the time, it's just finding random stuff on the ground or new locations. But fights can still break out, and when that happens, get ready for the most boppin' song of all time. Jesus Christ, that goes so unbelievably hard. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, combat. In combat, you have action points, or AP. AP is determined by your gumption, an actual real stat in the game, and it determines how many special actions you can take. Items don't use AP, so you can use them as many times as you want in a round, which is absolutely busted, and a basic attack will just end your turn. You can only target enemies in the front of their row, which adds just enough strategizing when targeting enemies. After your turn, whatever partner you chose in the tutorial goes next. They have a more limited pool of actions, but they're all pretty neat. Susie's abilities in particular are pretty good, especially the barrier building thing, but from what I can tell nobody is better than another. They're all useful in their own way. For situations both in and out of combat, food, booze, and potions return from Kingdom of Loathing, and the max you can consume is determined by your stomach, liver, and spleen stats respectively. Using these consumables is vital to passing skill checks in the overworld and doing massive amounts of damage in combat. Who knew that the best way to succeed in life was consuming 2 orders of food of dubious quality, washing that down with 2 glasses of whiskey, and finishing that all off by chugging 2 bottles of ranch? Poor Bearman's bowel movements are screwed. You can find all of these concerning items by exploring. Cracking open chests and solving random people's problems will often reward you with thematic consumables to help you on your journey. Well, let's see, what else is there? Oh, goblins also return from Kingdom of Loathing. Always thought that they were humorously out of place in a Western setting. I mean, they fit into the story okay, and you can even get a goblin as a partner, but it's still a strange inclusion, which of course makes it perfect for a Loathing game. It also somewhat connects West to Kingdom, which is really fun for lore reasons, whatever that lore might be. As with a ton of other RPGs, there's also an evil route you can take through the game by meddling with necromancy. Geez, goblins, demon cows, aliens, messed up clowns from hell, and necromancers? There's so much happening in this goddamn game. You can find necromancy books, hilariously called Nexmex, while exploring or doing side quests, and reading said books will give you a new skill to use in combat at a severe downgrade to your stats. When I first played West of Loathing, I didn't know this. I wanted as many skills as possible, so I read every book I could find. Yeah, it's a miracle I even finished the game. I also should mention that, while these skills are pretty cool and have fun flavor, mechanically most of them are very similar to the Beanslinger's abilities, so it might be a bit redundant to go down the necromancy path if you're already endowed in the arts and magic. The music is also really good. Ryan Ike did the soundtrack, and if it weren't for the goofy song titles, I wouldn't be sure if you knew it was a comedy game. The best thing about the soundtrack is that it fully commits to the Western theme. Every song feels like it could be lifted from The Lone Ranger or 3:10 to Yuma or something like that. Not a stick figure video game where the best items are consistently found at the bottom of gratuitously described spittoons. God, I'm surprised it took so long to mention the spittoons. Those are like the most famous part of the game. The perfect theming of each track makes it infinitely more baffling and funny when the game breaks from any genre conventions, leading to some of the most memorably weird scenarios in the game. God, everything in this game is just so good. Its music and writing, all of the care put into its world, every strange character and mission, even the semi-secret lines of dialogue that only happen if you're wearing the right hat. This game is really something special, something that only asymmetric games could really nail. Obviously there are games that are just as funny or just as meticulous with their writing, but none of them are quite like the Loathing games. It wouldn't be much longer until we got more of it. Through DLC! reckoning at Gun Manor. I hope you fellas are ready for another Rootin' Tootin' incorporeal creature shooting good time. Whoa!